a talk show that seemed like any other evening in Los Angeles, where Hollywood stars regularly gathered to discuss society, progress, and freedom. But tonight, the atmosphere was thick, as if a storm was brewing. And at the eye of the storm was Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary, with sharp eyes and a blazing Catholic faith. Facing her were three icons of woke Hollywood: Sophia Grant, a three-time Oscar-winning director with an arrogant smile; Ryan Cole, a movie star known for speaking at pro-abortion marches; and Emma Weiss, a producer who once called Christianity a toxic fairy tale. All three wore smug grins until Karoline spoke. "You invited me here to discuss faith, but really to humiliate it on air," she said, eyes locked on the camera. "Hollywood can mock Christianity as many times as it wants. But when you turn insulting faith into a televised pastime, when faith is dismissed as an outdated trend, that's no longer artistic freedom. That's an abuse of power. And I'm here to end it." The studio erupted. Catholic audience members clapped wildly, while the Hollywood side booed fiercely. But Leavitt didn't flinch, ready to confront the godless empire. And she wouldn't stay silent. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The Spotlight studio glowed with dazzling lights, the atmosphere electric as always for America's most iconic talk show. But tonight, an invisible current ran through the audience, as if everyone sensed a battle about to explode. Host Alex Harper, with a mischievous smile and razor-sharp delivery, stepped onto the stage, eyes scanning the guest lineup. "Welcome to the Spotlight. Tonight we'll witness an unyielding clash, Hollywood versus faith." Thunderous applause erupted. "Please welcome Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary, and three powerhouses of Hollywood: three-time Oscar-winning director Sophia Grant, movie star Ryan Cole, and talented producer Emma Weiss." The studio audience roared, but the divide was stark. One side cheered fervently, the other murmured skepticism. Leavitt, 27, sat upright, her eyes gleaming like steel, exuding the confidence of a Catholic warrior ready to take on an empire. Across from her, Sophia Grant crossed her arms, her arrogant smile masking a hint of caution. Ryan Cole shrugged, his eyes twinkling with mockery, and Emma Weiss, with a cold demeanor, studied Leavitt like a chess master pondering a move. Harper opened, her tone light but laced with intent. "Karoline, you're a fresh face in politics, known for your Christian faith. Hollywood, on the other hand, is often accused of, well, let's say, not being too friendly to religion. Do you think they're fair to your faith?" Harper's question was a stone tossed into a still lake, stirring the first ripples of debate. Leavitt smiled, not a friendly smile, but one of someone who knew she held the upper hand. "Fair, Alex. Hollywood isn't just unfair, they've made Christian faith a target. From blockbuster movies to TV shows, you constantly portray Jesus as a joke, Catholics as fanatics, and faith as an obsolete thing to erase. That's not storytelling. It's a deliberate campaign to undermine what millions of Americans cherish." The studio audience split instantly. One group clapped furiously, especially the Catholics, while others booed, creating a chaotic wall of sound. Harper raised a hand, trying to restore order, but her eyes sparkled, as if relishing the storm she'd unleashed. "Sophia, you're one of Hollywood's greatest directors. What do you make of this accusation?" Grant stood, her platinum hair shimmering under the lights, her voice smooth but icy. "Karoline, you're young, and I get your passion, but you're misunderstanding art. We don't oppose Christianity. We tell complex stories that challenge all beliefs, not just yours, but everyone's. If a film upsets you, it's doing its job, stirring thought, breaking molds." Grant's words drew applause from one corner of the audience, but it was quickly drowned out by protests from the other side. Ryan Cole jumped in, his tone slick like he was performing a movie scene. "Let's be real, Karoline. You're exaggerating. A few jokes in films don't mean we're against your faith. The world has moved forward, and Hollywood's just keeping up. If you want missionary movies, make them yourself." Cole smirked, his smug grin sparking cheers from some younger audience members, but causing others to clench their fists. Leavitt tilted her head, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Exaggerating, Ryan? I have data. Over the past 10 years, Hollywood has produced films that openly mock or distort Christianity, from lines ridiculing God to portraying priests as hypocrites. Only 2 films celebrated faith, and both were blocked from distribution by major studios like Emma's. That's not keeping up. It's a deliberate choice to attack what's sacred. Emma Weiss, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice cold and pragmatic. Karoline, movies are business. We make what audiences want. If religious films don't sell tickets, we don't invest. That's simple logic. Weiss shrugged, as if stating an indisputable fact. Leavitt stepped closer to the stage's edge, the lights highlighting her resolute face. Simple logic, Emma. Then why do you pour millions into failed films just to mock faith? I've spoken to Americans everywhere, from farmers in New Hampshire to students in California. They crave stories that honor faith, family, truth. But you don't give them a choice, because you're afraid those stories will expose Hollywood's hypocrisy. A memory flashed through Leavitt's mind. While running for Congress, she faced a New York journalist who asked, "Why do you cling to Catholicism in a modern world?" She had replied, "Because faith is truth, and truth is never outdated." Now that memory fueled her fire. "Hollywood thinks they can make faith a punchline forever," she said, her gaze sweeping over Grant Cole Weiss. "But you've underestimated us. Americans aren't silent anymore." The studio audience erupted. Catholics stood, clapping like thunder, while the Hollywood side shouted in protest. The big screen flickered with social media posts. Karoline Leavitt just made Hollywood a laughingstock, mixed with "she's a threat to art." Harper, sensing the situation spiraling, tried to interject. "Karoline, you're dividing the audience. Do you think this is the way to convince Hollywood to change?" But Leavitt wouldn't be distracted. She turned to the camera, her voice low but powerful. "I'm not here to convince Hollywood, I'm here to take back our culture. If you want to fight faith, get ready to lose." The studio audience, split into 2 clear factions, buzzed with whispers, their eyes glued to Karoline Leavitt and the Hollywood trio facing her. The air felt like a furnace, ready to ignite with the slightest spark. Alex Harper, with a professional smile but eyes glinting with mischief, stood center stage, her role as host now more like a fight coordinator than an MC. "Karoline, you've just heated up the studio with your claim that Hollywood targets faith," Harper said, her voice light but laced with intent. "But let's dig deeper. You say Hollywood denies audiences a choice. Are you implying they deliberately block religious films? Sophia, Ryan, Emma, where do we start?" Karoline Leavitt sat upright, hands lightly clasped, her gaze sharp but calm, like a fencer waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Across from her, Sophia Grant subtly adjusted her posture, her arrogant smile now tinged with caution. Ryan Cole leaned back, a mocking smirk playing on his lips. Emma Weiss maintained her icy expression, but her fingers tapping lightly on the armrest betrayed her tension. Harper turned to Leavitt, her voice a challenging invitation. "Karoline, if Hollywood is really blocking religious films, give us proof, or is it just a feeling?" Leavitt tilted her head slightly, her smile like a blade hidden in its sheath. "Not a feeling, Alex. It's a fact. I'm working with filmmaker David Martinez to produce a film about St. Joan of Arc, a story of courage and faith that could move millions of hearts. But when we pitched it to major studios, the response was unanimous: not enough appeal." "Emma, care to explain why a towering historical figure like Joan of Arc is deemed not worth investing in?" Weiss responded immediately, her voice sharp and cold as ice. "Karoline, this is business. Religious films don't draw crowds, audiences want entertainment, not sermons. If your project was rejected, it's because it's not commercially viable, that's it." Weiss's words drew applause from one group of the audience, but it was quickly drowned out by murmurs of discontent from the other side. Leavitt locked eyes with Weiss, her gaze unwavering. "That's simple, Emma. I have numbers that prove otherwise. Independent religious films, when given a chance, often exceed expectations. The Chosen series has millions of global viewers, funded by audiences because studios like yours wouldn't touch it. Meanwhile, you spend hundreds of millions on failed films glorifying violence and skepticism. That's not business. It's a deliberate choice to sideline faith." The audience instantly split, cheers from the faithful blending with boos from the Hollywood side. Harper, with the poise of a crowd conductor, turned to Grant. Sophia, you're a top director. Karoline says Hollywood fears religious stories. What do you think? Grant stood, her voice smooth but unable to hide her arrogance. Karoline, I respect your passion, but you don't understand filmmaking. Stories like Joan of Arc are too niche, too moralistic, too dry for modern audiences. We make films for a diverse world, not just a small group. If religious films fail, it's because they lack appeal. Grant sat down, arms crossed, as if she'd settled the matter. Cole jumped in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Karoline, no one's stopping you from making your saint movie. But don't blame us when no one watches. Audiences want blockbusters, not church films. Cole's words drew loud laughter from one corner of the audience, but they only sharpened Leavitt's gaze. She stood, her presence commanding the stage. Church films, Ryan, tell that to the millions who watched The Chosen or filled theaters for War Room. Audiences crave stories that uplift, that make them feel something greater. But you don't tell those stories, not because they don't sell, but because they threaten your worldview, where faith is a joke and values are disposable. A memory flashed through Leavitt's mind. As a child, she sat with her grandmother at a church screening of a film about Saint Therese, watching her grandmother's eyes well up. This film feels like it brings God's love closer, her grandmother said. That memory shaped Leavitt's belief that films could touch hearts, if only they were told. Now she carried that conviction against Hollywood. You're not just rejecting films, she said, her voice rising with quiet strength. You're rejecting millions who crave them, and they're tired of being dismissed. The audience erupted, thunderous applause from the faithful mixing with fierce protests. Harper, sensing the heat, pivoted to Weiss. Emma, Karoline, says studios deliberately sideline religious films. Any rebuttal? Weiss narrowed her eyes, her voice sharp as a blade. Karoline, you're spinning a narrative. We're businesses, not charities. Religious films are risky, limited audience, high costs. If we don't invest, it's because they're not profitable. You can't force us to make films just to please you. Weiss's words were calm, but a defensive edge betrayed a crack. Leavitt seized the moment, her voice a controlled blaze. Not profitable. Emma, then why do you spend millions on failed films, knowing they'll stir controversy, but draw attention? That's not business, it's manipulation. You're not afraid of risk, you're afraid of stories like Joan of Arc, a young girl, unarmed, with only her faith, who changed the world. That courage terrifies you. Harper, still wearing a strained smile, pivoted to keep the debate alive. Karoline, you say audiences want these stories, but are they numerous enough to change Hollywood? Sophia, what do you think? Harper's question opened a new round of debate, but Leavitt didn't let the moment slip. She turned to the camera, her voice ringing like a call to arms. Numerous enough, Alex. I've met them. Mothers, students, workers across America. They're not a small group. They're the soul of this country. And they'll fight to make our culture honor faith, not trample it. The stage lights seemed to burn brighter, spotlighting Karoline Leavitt, who stood amid the storm of debate with the calm of a seasoned warrior. Across from her, Sophia Grant clenched her hands, her eyes glinting with arrogance but tinged with unease. Ryan Cole held his mocking smile, though it wavered. Emma Weiss, with her cold demeanor, slightly furrowed her brow, as if plotting a counterstrike. Alex Harper, the seasoned host, stood on the fault line, her smile now laced with tension as she steered the debate in a new direction. Karoline, you've got us thinking about Hollywood rejecting religious films, Harper said, her voice smooth but challenging. But do you think Hollywood is deliberately shaping American culture in a specific direction? And if so, what direction is that? Leavitt sat upright, her eyes like a smoldering fire ready to ignite, her voice low but razor sharp, each word a carefully aimed arrow. Hollywood isn't just shaping culture, they're manipulating it. You don't tell stories to reflect America, but to mold it into your vision, a place where faith is ridiculed, family is trivialized, and morality becomes negotiable. Sophia, why do you discard the core values of millions, replacing them with stories that glorify chaos and selfishness? The studio audience split instantly. Cheers from the faithful blending with boos from the opposition. Harper, her eyes glinting, turned to Grant. Sophia, Karoline, just made a heavy accusation. Hollywood manipulating culture? How do you respond? Grant stood, her platinum hair shimmering under the lights, her voice smooth but tinged with disdain. Karoline, you're spinning a sensational story. Hollywood doesn't manipulate anything. We make films to entertain, to reflect a diverse world where people are free to believe what they want. If you think family or faith is trivialized, it's because society has changed, not because we're forcing it. Grant sat down, arms crossed, as if her words had ended the debate. Cole jumped in, his tone slick but laced with mockery. Let's be honest, Karoline. You want us to make movies about perfect families praying every night. Audiences would yawn and turn off the TV. We tell real stories, not fairy tales. Cole's words drew loud laughter from one group of the audience, but they only sharpened Leavitt's gaze. She stood, stepping slowly to the stage's edge, her presence like a strong wind sweeping through the studio. Real, Ryan. You call movies that glorify division, violence and lust real. I call that a distorted lens. Hollywood doesn't reflect society. You shape it by pumping billions into stories that weaken what binds us. Family, community, faith. You want audiences to believe those values are outdated, but I've met millions of Americans who say otherwise. A memory flashed through Leavitt's mind. As a college student, she attended a community film screening in her hometown, where an independent movie about family love left the room silent with emotion. This is the kind of film we need, a young mother had told her. That memory strengthened Leavitt's resolve. You're not just choosing stories to tell, she said, her voice rising like a call to action. You're choosing stories to strangle. And those stories about loyalty, sacrifice, faith, are what America is crying out for. The audience roared, cheers from the faithful drowning out fierce protests from the Hollywood side. Harper, sensing the heat, turned to Weiss. Emma, Karoline, says Hollywood is strangling core values. As a producer, what's your take? Weiss responded, her voice cold and pragmatic. Karoline, you're romanticizing. We make movies to make money, not to shape society. If audiences wanted stories about faith or family, they'd buy tickets, and we'd make them. But the data says they want something else. Weiss shrugged, as if she'd closed the matter. Leavitt smiled, the smile of someone who knew she held the upper hand. Data, Emma, or your manipulation? I've seen you aggressively promote films that glorify self-interest and division, while independent films about family or faith are buried for lack of marketing budgets. You don't let audiences decide. You decide for them, and I'm here to break that cycle. Harper, her eyes flickering with unease, steered toward a new direction. Karoline, you say Hollywood is strangling culture, but do audiences really want to return to the values you're talking about? Ryan, what do you think? Her voice rang out like a rallying cry. Audiences want it, Alex, and they'll stand up to demand it. Leavitt sat calmly, her gaze sharp, exuding the confidence of someone who had faced fiercer battles. Across from her, Sophia Grant crossed her arms, her arrogance now tinged with worry. Ryan Cole smirked, but his mocking smile had faded. Emma Weiss maintained her icy expression, but her eyes briefly wavered. Alex Harper, the seasoned host, stood at the center, her smile still perfect but her eyes betraying tension as she guided the debate in a new direction. Karoline, you just accused Hollywood of shaping culture to its own ends, Harper said, her voice smooth but with a provocative edge. But are you saying Hollywood isn't just curating stories but distorting truth to serve its purposes? Let's start there. Michael Vaughn, CEO of one of the biggest studios, will join us. The studio audience erupted with cheers and boos as Michael Vaughn, a middle-aged man with an authoritative presence, stepped onto the stage. His cold demeanor and expensive suit were a statement of Hollywood's power. Vaughn sat next to Weiss, his eyes scanning Leavitt as if sizing up an insignificant opponent. Harper turned to him, her voice brimming with excitement. Michael, Karoline claims Hollywood isn't honest with audiences. She says you distort the truth. What do you think about this, Karoline? Leavitt stood, her presence like a powerful gust, drawing every eye. Her voice was low but sharp as a blade, each word carefully chosen to hit its mark. Michael, Hollywood doesn't just tell stories, you rewrite the truth. Your studio's latest film, heavily promoted, slanders the resurrection, a historically documented event recorded for centuries as a myth. You're not just creating, you're distorting what's sacred to millions. Why is Hollywood so afraid of the truth? Vaughn responded immediately, his voice calm but commanding. Karoline, you're talking about art like it's a history book. Our films aren't meant to recreate truth. We tell stories to entertain, to evoke emotion. If you want documentaries, watch the History Channel. We make movies to sell tickets. Vaughn's words drew applause from one group of the audience, but it was quickly drowned out by murmurs of discontent. Leavitt tilted her head slightly, her smile like an arrow hidden in its quiver. Entertainment, Michael, or propaganda? When you deliberately distort the resurrection, an event corroborated by thousands of historical documents, into a fictional tale, that's not art. It's a calculated effort to undermine the audience's faith. I've read the script for that film. Every detail, from camera angles to dialogue, was designed to mock. You're not telling stories, you're lying. The audience roared, cheers from the faithful blending with protests from the Hollywood side. Harper, her eyes glinting, turned to Grant. Sophia, Karoline says Hollywood lies about the truth. As a director, what's your take? Grant stood, her voice smooth but tinged with defensiveness. Karoline, you're oversimplifying. Films are interpretations, not documentaries. We draw inspiration from history, but we're not bound by it. If you want unfiltered truth, read a book. Our films serve audiences, not churches. Grant sat down, but her eyes avoided Leavitt's. Cole jumped in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Karoline, you really think audiences care about truth in movies? They want drama, emotion, not history lessons. Michael's film is a hit because it's bold, not because it lives. Cole's words drew loud laughter from one corner of the audience, but they only intensified Leavitt's gaze. She stepped closer to the stage's edge, the lights highlighting her face. Bold, Ryan, or cowardly? You don't dare tell stories that honor the truth because they require courage. Courage to face the values millions of Americans cherish. Instead, you choose to distort, mock, and conceal. But the truth isn't easily buried. And audiences know it. A memory flashed through Leavitt's mind. As a young student, she attended a college debate where a professor claimed the resurrection was just a myth. She stood up, heart pounding, and countered with historical documents she'd studied. The truth doesn't need anyone's permission, she said. Then, now that memory fueled her. You can distort the truth on screen, she said, her voice ringing like a call to arms. But you can't distort the hearts of those who believe in it. Harper, with a strained smile, turned to Vaughn. Michael, Karoline says your studio deliberately distorts the truth. Vaughn smirked, his voice cold. Karoline, you're turning movies into a religious war. We make films to make money, not to argue with scholars. If audiences don't like it, they can skip the ticket. That's their freedom. Vaughn's words were calm, but the defensiveness in his tone was clear. Leavitt fired back, her voice an unquenchable flame. Freedom, Michael, you don't give audiences freedom when you control what they see. I've met Americans, young and old, rich and poor. They crave the truth, not lies packaged prettily. Vaughn smirked, but his smile lasted only a moment before fading under the weight of Karoline's gaze. It was no longer the look of a woman arguing for reason. It was the look of someone carrying the burden of a generation dismissed, a generation deemed naive for believing in something more sacred than fame or profit. Harper, still filming, swallowed hard. She could feel the air in the room shifting. This was no longer a typical interview. This was a moment of truth, and Leavitt was commanding it. Hollywood was once a symbol of the American dream. Karoline continued, stepping toward the camera. But you've turned it into a machine that erodes trust, faith, and even human dignity. I'm not here to ask permission to speak the truth. I'm here to declare that millions out there, the ones you think don't matter, are waking up. A clap rang out from backstage. A cameraman lowered his equipment, his eyes brimming with tears. Another crew member nodded in agreement. The initial heavy silence now dissolved into waves of support. Vaughn stood motionless. For the first time he realized he was losing, not because of logic, but because Leavitt had touched something he couldn't, the heart. You can say what you want, but in the end, Vaughn began, but Karoline cut him off. In the end, you'll have to face the audience, and this time they won't stay silent. This time they won't just be ticket buyers. There'll be a voice, and that voice, Michael, no longer belongs to you. Harper cautiously cut to a break, but the applause had now spread. Karoline turned away, needing no Hollywood-style triumphant ending. She had won by daring to speak. She had won by refusing to compromise. And as she left the room, she wasn't just Karoline Leavitt. She was the woman who made an entire system listen. In the aftermath, a media firestorm erupted, stronger than anything Karoline could have imagined. The clip of Leavitt confronting Vaughn spread like wildfire, not only on conservative platforms like Liberty Now or Truth Voice, but also unexpectedly on major outlets like CNN, BBC, and even TMZ. Blazing headlines followed: Karoline Leavitt, when faith confronts Hollywood, 1 minute standing up for truth. Karoline silences the studio. Has Hollywood gone too far in rewriting history? Social media comments exploded. Never heard of her, but she's right. We've been silent too long. Whether you believe or not, someone standing up to power like that deserves to be heard. Within 24 hours, her name topped social media platforms. Clips like Karoline says no to lies, and the truth doesn't need anyone's permission became background audio for thousands of videos, remixes, and even memes. Meanwhile, mainstream media split. Some, like reporter Marcus Tilton from The Atlantic, penned an op-ed titled, "Have We Forgotten to Respect Faith in the Race to Make Films?" questioning Hollywood's moral responsibility in shaping public culture. Others attacked her fiercely. Leavitt isn't a hero. She's a mouthpiece for disguised religious extremism. Jenna Roth, The New Yorker. The debate at the spotlight left an indelible echo, like a battle just ended but still smoldering. In the weeks that followed, millions of posts spread calls for a culture that honors faith rather than tramples it. Karoline Leavitt, who once faced an entire Hollywood empire on that unforgiving stage, didn't stop. She worked closely with conservative filmmaker David Martinez, turning her on-air promises into reality, a film about Saint Joan of Arc, funded by thousands of everyday people, needing no Hollywood approval. Now in Washington, D.C., the premiere's lights shone brightly, marking a new milestone in the movement Leavitt had ignited. This wasn't just an event, it was a declaration that Americans were ready to reclaim their story. The vast premiere hall for Saint Joan of Arc buzzed with energy, like a fire blazing in the dark. Thousands of attendees, from religious activists to Gen Z youth, filled the seats, excited whispers blending with the shimmering light from the large screen behind. Leavitt standing at the podium, her eyes radiant with the same resolve that shook the spotlight. No longer under harsh studio lights, her faith's strength seemed to radiate, captivating every gaze. Beside her, David Martinez, with a humble smile and eyes sparkling with pride. The film, funded by ordinary people rather than major studios, was a living testament to the movement to reclaim Hollywood. On the large screen, a short trailer for the film had just ended, leaving the room in a state of quiet emotion. Leavitt stepped to the podium, her voice ringing out, strong yet warm, like a breeze carrying hope. "We gather today not just to watch a film. We're here to declare that Hollywood cannot control the heart of America." The audience erupted, applause crashing like a tidal wave, mixed with chants of Karoline from across the hall. On social media, posts spread, "Leavitt leads the cultural revolution." Leavitt raised her hand, signaling for silence, her eyes blazing like fire. "I want to share something," she said, her voice low but magnetic. "When I was young, my mother told me about a film she saw at church, about a woman who lived for faith and changed a community. She said, 'Karoline, a righteous story can change the world.' Today we're telling that story." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, connecting with every individual. Hollywood rejected Saint Joan of Arc. They said it had no market, that faith doesn't matter on screen. But you, all of you here, and millions out there, proved them wrong. This film, funded by you, has outgrossed Hollywood's latest blockbuster. Americans have spoken, and they choose stories that uplift the soul. The audience rose, cheers thundering like a storm. The big screen flashed posts. Karoline announces resounding victory. A group of Gen Z students held up a banner. "Faith leads." Leavitt smiled but wasn't done. She signaled a technician to play a short clip, a moment from the spotlight when Michael Vaughn faltered under her question about historical truth. The audience laughed loudly, but Leavitt raised her hand, her voice turning serious. Michael Vaughn, Sophia Grant, Ryan Cole, Emma Weiss, they thought they could shape our minds, bury the truth, and push sacred values out of culture. she said, her voice a gentle but sharp declaration of war. But they forgot one thing: righteous stories never die, faith never surrenders, and people like you won't let them win. She paused, her eyes piercing through the screen, reaching live stream viewers. Today we're not just premiering a film, we're building a new culture where faith is honored, not trampled. The hall shook with applause and resounding cheers. A memory flashed through Leavitt's mind. While running for Congress, she faced a small crowd in New Hampshire, mocked by an opponent for her Catholic faith. Faith is strength, she had replied, and that crowd stood with her. Now that memory fueled her speech. I see that strength in you, she continued, her voice rising like a hymn. From parents who donated to this film to young people sharing #TakeBackHollywood, you are the wind Hollywood cannot stop. Suddenly, a reporter from a pro-Hollywood outlet stood, his voice cutting through with hostility. Karoline, you're turning a film into a political tool. This is propaganda. The audience murmured, but Leavitt didn't waver. She stepped down from the podium, approaching the man, her eyes calm but icy. Propaganda? She retorted, her voice a challenge. Propaganda is when Hollywood spends billions to make faith a punchline, to bury the values that unite us. We're telling a story of courage, sacrifice, and what makes America. If that scares you, maybe you're the one who needs to rethink. The audience exploded, cheers nearly shaking the hall. The reporter sat down, speechless. On social media, posts surged, Karoline silences Hollywood. Leavitt returned to the podium, her eyes blazing as she concluded. Today we prove that faith is stronger than power, that a righteous story is stronger than money. This is the start of a new era, where we shape our culture. The St. Joan of Arc premiere in Washington, D.C., became a triumphant flag, not just for Karoline Leavitt, but for millions of Americans craving a culture that honors faith. In the days that followed, a wave of faith spread like a storm across social media, with millions of posts sharing inspiration from the film and Leavitt's call. The film, funded by audiences rather than major studios, not only topped the box office but sparked an unstoppable movement. Hollywood, once deeming itself invincible, now faced a new reality: the power of those who believe in a righteous story. At a media conference in New York a few weeks later, Leavitt stood before a packed hall, not as the White House press secretary, but as a symbol of a cultural revolution. The soft stage lighting illuminated her, highlighting a confident yet humble smile. The audience, from journalists to independent filmmakers, sat rapt, some live streaming the event on their phones. Leavitt, in a pale blue suit, began with a gentle but powerful voice. We've done what Hollywood said was impossible. We've proven that a film honoring faith, built by the people, can change an entire industry. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, as if connecting with each person. But this victory isn't just about box office numbers, it's about reclaiming our voice. Hollywood tried to shape our minds, but we stood up and said, enough. The audience applauded, not as frantically as at the premiere, but deeply, as if witnessing a historic moment. Leavitt continued, her voice rising like a declaration. A major studio that mocked our film went bankrupt last week because audiences turned away. Other studios, once rejecting faith-based stories, are now scrambling to announce religious projects to save their bottom line. And a conservative streaming platform, built by our supporters, is challenging Hollywood's monopoly. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with conviction. This isn't just a film, it's the start of a new era. A memory flashed through Leavitt's mind. As a child in New Hampshire, she listened to her grandmother talk about the days when Hollywood made films like The Ten Commandments, stories that brought families together and conveyed profound meaning. Someday you'll help bring those stories back, she had promised her grandmother. Now that memory became reality. We're not just winning a battle, she said, her voice ringing like a call to action. We're building a culture where faith, family, and truth are honored. The audience rose, applause lingering, mixed with chants of Karoline. Leavitt raised her hand, her voice softening, becoming intimate. I didn't do this alone. I stand here because of you, those who donated, shared, and believed we could change things. And I especially thank my family, who taught me that faith is a flame that never dies. She stepped off the stage, mingling with the crowd, shaking hands, listening to their stories. A mother shared that her son returned to church after watching St. Joan of Arc. A Gen Z student said he started writing a script for a religious film. Leavitt listened, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew Hollywood wouldn't surrender easily. People like Michael Vaughn, Sophia Grant, Ryan Cole, and Emma Weiss were still quietly counterattacking. But they had lost their greatest power, the audience's silence. On social media, the movement kept spreading. Posts went viral. Karoline Leavitt didn't just defeat Hollywood. She inspired a generation. #TakeBackHollywood. Religious organizations began honoring Leavitt, calling her a pioneer of faith. But Leavitt, in a quiet moment after the conference, gazed out the window, her eyes distant. She didn't seek glory. She sought an America where core values were protected. "This is a fight for our soul," she whispered, a promise to herself. Karoline Leavitt returned to her hotel room at the end of the day, her high heels heavy with each step, not because they hurt, but because of the spiritual weight of everything she had experienced. The applause, the warm handshakes, the tears of a father who had lost faith, all flowed through her mind like an unending stream. She set her bag on the chair and walked to the window. Below was Los Angeles, glittering with lights, but to her, it had never shone as brightly as the moment that mother spoke of her son returning to church. That wasn't just a personal victory. It was proof what she believed in wasn't a distant past, but a living hope. She opened her laptop. Her inbox overflowed with emails from supporters, organizations, even those who once mocked her. One message stood out. "Karoline, I once wrote an article criticizing you. Now I apologize. You've given me reason to believe the truth can still rise above the noise." She opened her phone, scrolling through the flood of news from the conference. A faith awakening in Los Angeles. Is Leavitt changing the face of American culture? Washington Observer. A movement to reclaim storytelling. Faith Watch. Hollywood faces a faith storm. The story of the woman who wouldn't back down. The Chronicle. But behind all those headlines, Karoline knew she couldn't grow complacent. Today's victory was only the first step. Hollywood was a vast machine, lubricated by profit, fame, and fading values. People like Vaughn, Sophia Grant, the influential director, who publicly criticized preachy films, or Ryan Cole, the screenwriter, who distorted Christian symbols for artistic purposes, were still there, sharpening their rhetoric, crafting works ready to attack faith with the finesse of a conductor. Karoline stepped away from the screen, poured a cup of tea, and sat at the small table. She opened her leather notebook, where she recorded her most important thoughts, prayers, and ideas for new films. On a blank page she wrote, "We don't fight with anger, but with truth. We don't win with mockery, but with courage. We don't counterattack with fire and smoke, but with light and compassion." Outside the window, car horns echoed. But in her mind, another door was opening. A door to something greater, not just rebuttal, but creation. She recalled a call from a veteran Oscar-winning director who had left Hollywood, unable to stomach its pressure to compromise. "We need to tell stories worth telling," he said, "not because faith is a trendy topic, but because it's what humans always seek, whether they realize it or not." The story of Karoline Leavitt and When Karoline Leavitt Stops Holding Back Against Atheist Hollywood reflects the deep cultural tensions in the United States today, where traditional values like faith, family, and truth are often challenged by mainstream cultural forces, particularly Hollywood. Through Leavitt's journey, from fiery debates at the Spotlight to the symbolic triumph at the St. Joan of Arc premiere, the story portrays a polarized American society where many feel their voices are drowned out by powerful media. Leavitt's confrontations with figures like Sophia Grant, Ryan Cole, Emma Weiss, and Michael Vaughn mirror the reality of ordinary Americans, parents, students, workers, struggling to defend core values against a tide of secularism and commercialization. Her victory, with a film outgrossing Hollywood blockbusters and a major studio's bankruptcy, shows the power of collective action and personal conviction in changing a seemingly invincible system. The lesson from this story is that every American has the power to shape culture by speaking up and acting on their beliefs. As Leavitt did by rallying audiences to fund the film and share on X, you can start small, join community discussions, support art projects that honor your values, or use social media to spread positive messages. Leavitt may inspire younger generations to return to faith. In today's United States, where cultural debates often lead to division, learn from Leavitt, stand firm in your beliefs, but always listen and connect. By acting with courage and sincerity, you can help build an America where core values are honored, not obscured by distorted narratives. Subscribe to the channel to join the #TakeBackHollywood movement. Thank you for supporting the journey for faith and truth. See you in the next video, where we continue building a culture to be proud of.